And lo and behold, we have football season to keep us entertained, at least on Sundays, and if not during the week, and guessing who's in the lineup and who's not in the lineup, and talking all things Jacksonville Jaguars, as I will be doing with many, many friends here at WNST as the week progresses. Luke Jones is on the backfields in Owings Mills. I was with him on Wednesday as John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco and some others took the podium, and there's a nice vibe going on with the team. I'll be honest with you, a lot of joking around. I see some bonds. I see guys lockering next to each other who seem to like each other. There's a nice feeling. 2-0 plays into that. But this is a loose group right now, Luke.
Well, it should be. They're 2-0. It's life is good in that regard. You can talk about who they've played and how it's looked and what needs to get better and who's on the field, who's not on the field. All those factors are going to be there on a weekly basis. But when you're winning, that sure beats the alternative, as the Ravens learned last year. And an interesting opportunity here, even over the next few weeks. We've talked about the schedule. We've talked about how they need to get off to a really good start, not just to put the memory of last year behind them, but also understanding what the second half schedule looks like. And so far, they've taken care of business. Now, it got really hairy there, especially in Cleveland when you're down 20-0 in the matter of a handful of minutes.
What were you thinking? Were you thinking they were going to win? All along I was thinking this is so Cleveland, and maybe we don't win, but I wouldn't have bet against the Ravens. Spotting them 20 points, but when the kick came back right away, like that answer, instead of 21-0, it was 20-2. I thought, well, there's the door kicked open, and damn if it didn't. You could have written that script, couldn't you?
Yeah, look, I wasn't thinking the game was over by any stretch of the imagination, if that's what you're asking.
Dude, you sat next to me out there many, many times, and those four guys that sit in front of us, they're pounding on the glass when it's literally, they're pounding on the glass and giving us the finger when it's 20-0. And then in the fourth quarter, you look down, and there are empty seats, everywhere.
Oh, no doubt about it. But at the same time, when you're coming off of a 5-11 season, you can't just assume that history repeats itself. You just can't.
But if you're wondering if the Ravens are any good, they did come back from that. There is something to be said. It's a nice piece of the story this year to come back in a game like that.
Sure. But, at the same time, you got to build on it. You can't, and that's one thing I asked Jimmy Smith, for example, is when you have something like that happens, is it a learning experience that helps you moving forward? Because even if you are winning, complacency is not going to set in nearly as easily when you realize you fell behind 20-0 to a team like Cleveland, who has lost more players and lost Corey Coleman this week, and they might not win a game all year. That might have been the Browns' best shot at even winning a game, the way things are looking for them right now. But for the Ravens, it's a little reminder how things can spiral out of control really quickly. And, you can't afford to do that, especially on the road. The Browns might be the one team that you can afford to do that against, and live to kind of joke about it after the fact, to come back and win. So, it was good to see. I think even the more pessimistic people out there think the Ravens are better than they were last year. I don't think there's anyone out there picking them to be a 5-11 kind of team again. I think the question is, where are they in terms of, are they serious playoff contender? Are they serious AFC title game contender? Are they more...
Well, if they're 9-7, they're 500 the rest of the way. Think about that, right?
Yeah,
sure, so if they're 9-7, which means probably not making the playoffs, but giving you a good, then they're going to do a lot of losing. Then you're predicting that they're going to lose a lot of games, like a home game to the Redskins or a road game in Jacksonville. Certainly, you would just, look at the Steelers games and the Bengals games and say those are 4 losses. The Patriots is a 5th loss. Going to Dallas might be a 6th loss. I'm being negative ninny here. Going to the Giants and the Jets, I don't know, they'll lose one of those. That's going to be a 9-7 team, right? That's the way you'd have to look at it. If you think they're 10-6 or 11-5, then this is one of the ones that's got to be a win, because certainly the ones I brought up aren't going to be this hard, right?
Yeah, to me, this is a really interesting game for the Ravens. We're still trying to figure out what teams are all about in the NFL. 2 games into the season, it's still...
There are a lot of teams that are Jekyll Hyde the way Jacksonville. Jacksonville, week 1, That's good. That we can accept that. They'll win a lot of games playing that way. Week 2, they go on the road. They're losing 4 touchdowns. Can't win that way, right? So there's a lot of teams that have had a good one and a bad one, right? And that's pretty typical of the NFL, right?
And there are even teams that have had 2 bad ones, quite frankly, like the Los Angeles Rams, and they've won one of them. That team's averaging 4.5 points a game right now, and they've won a game. So, that's not to be dismissive of what's happened to this point. We're an eighth of the way through the season. Those 2 games are important games. We know every game's important in the NFL, but, you're still at that time where you're trying to see who really separates as far as, okay, these are the teams that are for real, and these are the teams that won a game or 2 early in the season, but aren't going to be as much of a factor. As much as we talked the other day about Carson Wentz and how good of a story that is, I'm not convinced that the Eagles are all that terribly good. In the same way that a lot of people look at the Ravens right now and ask, how good are they? They beat Buffalo, who's woeful, and they beat Cleveland, who might not win a game all year. So you kind of go through. And
I'm a big Eagles fan this week, by the way. I text Jimmy Schwartz and I said,
sure.
"Fly Eagles, fly, baby! Let's go! Come on, ramp it up! Let's all eat soft pretzels and drink bad beer. I'm for it, man. Let's go Eagles."
Yeah, and and that would be a heck of a statement for them if they're able to beat Pittsburgh, who, like it or not, they've looked like
maybe the best team in the league, right?
Yeah,
maybe.
They've looked pretty darn good.
But there you go. We're judging it on a 2. We got power rankings around here every week, right, Luke? Let's do our power rankings.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not even trying to be critical of that, but that's there's a lot that we don't know right now about the Ravens, about everyone else. Jacksonville was a sexy kind of a sleeper pick in the AFC, and they're 0-2.
Hey, I thought this Jacksonville-Oakland period in the season was kind of treacherous. I thought all of these teams beginning now, these next 5 weeks before the bye week, to say, all right, Jaguars, they're a team going. They're going in the right direction. Oakland, they're going up. Redskins, well, they won the division last year, and we don't really get a chance to beat them every 4 years. And then you got to take the bus up to, or the train up to New York and take on a Giants and Jets teams that, quite frankly, much like the Ravens, you look at both of them and say, well, they could win 9 or 10 games. Or they could go 5-11 and the wheels could come off the cart. For either one of those teams. Same thing with the Ravens. I've looked at all this, but now that I'm up on it and now that I've seen the Ravens, let's talk about the team, Luke. I like Joe Flacco right now. I like Dennis Pitta right now. I like the O-line right now in saying, they're getting bet on by a bunch of veteran coaches and a veteran O-line coach that says, I like Alex Lewis. I like Ronnie Stanley. I want a Mulatalo Ogden over the next 3 or 4 years. I want to grow something here, and with these young guys and bet my ranch that we're going to be playing in a Super Bowl in Minnesota next year, right? Or somewhere down the line, because I've got a quarterback who has his act together, who's getting better, who's getting older, who's getting smarter, more stable. I like a lot of the components of what I'm seeing. And, I'm not going to jump on and say, well, they should have beaten the Browns by 4 touchdowns or the Bills by 3 if they were any good. This is a building thing, and having written a couple of books on championship teams, that's the way these things work. I'm not going to judge them on anything other than did they survive last weekend, and are they getting key guys hurt, or are they getting healthier and better, or are they getting unhealthier and worse? And I think seeing the Orioles sort of unravel here right now because of their shortcomings, I know where the Ravens' shortcomings are. I know they'd like to have more speed, more pass rush. I know they'd like to run the ball better. But I tell you what, I like that they're not getting a lot of penalties. I like that they're well put together emotionally and they don't have Vontaze Burficts running around, that at any moment the firecracker could go off and you could find yourself, in that, R.I.P. Orlando Brown, but in the biggest game of the year, getting 15-yard shoving penalties to allow kickers to move 15 yards. I don't think this team's constructed that way. And for that, I really like. Now, where the leadership's going to come from and where the great players are going to come from and how Brandon Williams goes from being in the house of good to the house of we need to give him $80 million and keep him around, and C.J. Mosley, that's the stuff I need to see.
Sure. There's a lot to like about this team. I think that, you mentioned when you have Joe Flacco, you have a chance. Assuming you have at least a good amount of talent around him. I don't think he's in that rare territory where he can make really average, underwhelming players look great. I think he needs some good talent around him to really utilize him best, but the Ravens have that. I mean, you mentioned the offensive line. I like it for the future. I don't love it right now because they're averaging 3 yards a carry. I mean, this team, they got to get their running game figured out. I mean, that's something that you don't want to be in a position where you're asking Joe Flacco to throw 45, 50 times a game when you start playing some better competition than what they have through the first 2 games.
What is figured out for you? I mean, I'm honestly, like, what would be, give me an ideal game plan to go on the road to Jacksonville to play a team that I would say we probably have more talent than they do right now, right? Probably even more upside because we have a real quarterback, and they have a quarterback that got him down by 4 touchdowns last week. So just on that basis alone, what is the game plan this weekend? How much should they run? What should Forsett? And, give me a box score. That's kind of an interesting little draw for this team right now. What does it look like on Sunday?
Well, I mean, you look at what Jacksonville has been so far. I mean, defensively, they've struggled to stop the run, but at the same time, they fell behind big time in San Diego. So how much of that was kind of skewed by the fact that they were trailing and the Chargers were running the football? But their pass defense hasn't been bad. Offensively, they've struggled to run the ball way more than the Ravens have. Quite frankly, I mean, T.J. Yeldon's averaging 2.4 yards per carry. But for the Ravens, this is another one of those games where it's how I talked about the Browns game last week. I don't think it's quite as much about what Jacksonville does, although I think you have to be aware of that passing game with those wide receivers. Allen Robinson off to a really slow start.
Well, they haven't thrown the ball to him from what I'm hearing.
Right. And that's my thing. He's talented. I mean, we've seen that the last year or two. I mean, he can play. And Alan Hearns is someone who has been able to find the end zone a lot for them over the last, certainly last year. Bortles has turned the ball over, but they can chuck it. I mean, they can. Can they chuck it to the level that is going to take them to the playoffs? I'm skeptical of that. But there is some young talent on that team on both sides of the ball that you need to be aware of. But when you're talking about an 0-2 team that is desperate, and that's where they are right now, they cannot afford to fall to 0-3.
Hey, dude, they're talking the F word on Gus Bradley down there. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. He's 12-37, 12-39, whatever the hell it is, and they play Indianapolis next week in London. So, after this game, they go to London, 48 hours after this game to go over there to do their thing with the Colts. If they're 0-4 and they have their bye, oh, my God. I mean, who knows what would happen down there. And I know that they've improved everything. Luke, I'm looking forward. I'm expecting a little bit of the cocktail party down there on Sunday morning, because that's what the vibe I'm getting is they're becoming young and hip and people are coming to the games and they've made it affordable and the scoreboards and the pools and, all of that stuff. And I'm expecting that if they're up 17-14, with 6 minutes left to go, it's going to be a tough environment to play in on Sunday. But I'm also expecting that if Bortles throws 2 picks early in the game and Weddle returns one, and Tucker hits a 51-yard field goal and it's 16-3 at the half, I would expect that it could get real sleepy there real quick and. Ownership hates that, right? September, beautiful day. We're 0-3. I mean, that's an ugly, ugly feeling for everything they've been through. And firings happen, right? I mean, ask Rex Ryan, right?
Yeah, and I would think if they lose on Sunday, and then as you mentioned, they go to London after that. That would feel very 2015 Dolphins like. Think about it. I mean, last year, what happened with the Dolphins? They end up firing Philbin. There were some expectations for that team. There were some expectations that they expected to be decent, and they weren't. So I think that could very well be a scenario. So I think getting back to
but it's an important game for the franchise. I mean, this isn't just a trip to Jacksonville, right? I mean, for that franchise, for that coach, this is a massive game for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the need is there on the other side. They're not just going to roll over.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be careful when you're talking about an 0-2 team. And I asked Joe Flacco about this. I asked Jimmy Smith about this on the opposite side of the ball. You have to be ready to, kind of expect the unexpected. You have to be ready to expect them to throw some different pressures at you, to stunt, to show some different looks in coverage. On the opposite side, you have to be ready for the trick play, the gadget play. We talked about those elements with the Browns after they had looked so bad in their Week 1 contest, Week 1 loss against Philly. That you have to be ready for those kind of things. So that's where I think the Ravens need to start fast. You cannot afford to fall behind again early. And I'm not saying 20-0, but you want to try to start fast. That's going to be the biggest key to getting the running game going. I mean, everyone tries to talk. Well, you need to run 20 times, 25 times, 30 times. All those numbers are well and good. It's all about game situation. You know that. I mean, you fall behind 20-0 as the Ravens did on Sunday. It's going to be
You're going to be pass happy in the box score.
It's going to be tougher to establish your run. Yeah, because you want to try to catch up. It doesn't mean you should completely abandon it, and I think Mark Trestman has been guilty of that. Not so much talking this year, but even last year at times.
But you also have to have confidence that you can actually do it. If you get in the huddle and you really, honest to God, feel like we're not running, we can't run, if we try to run, we're going to be in 2nd and 9 or maybe 2nd and 12, then let's just pass because we got a $25 million quarterback and it's what we do better. It's what we're built to do. It's what we drafted linemen to do. There are some philosophical issues here about, and certainly talking to guys like Brian Billick that design offense, it's a passing league. It is. But that being said, boy, it'd be nice to run the football on Sunday, and if you can, and you do it successfully, you don't have to do much else on the road at a place like Jacksonville. If somehow Forsett goes 18 for 91 and, West goes 13 for 74, all of a sudden, 2nd and 3s and 2nd and 4s, you start to feel like, well, we're running the ball well. Hell, let's just keep running the ball because that's what you do when you're getting 6 yards on the run.
It really simplifies the game for you. I mean, 6 yards a carry. I mean, that's a lot to ask for, but can you be at 4.5 yards per carry? I mean, that's a reasonable running game. It's not best in the league kind of quality, but it's certainly good enough where you're sticking with it. And that's the goal for this team right now. I think the big key, and just to go back to a game plan, be aggressive early on. Take some shots downfield. I mean, we've seen this team can go vertical. I mean, Mike Wallace. You have Rashad Perriman you're mixing in and continuing to get him established as an NFL receiver. Chris Moore has flashed despite the bad drop last week in Cleveland. I think you still like what you've seen from him overall as a rookie 4th-rounder. So they have some guys that they can throw the ball, push the ball down the field with. The problem is they were so late in doing it on Sunday. They weren't aggressive early enough. Flacco talked about this with Trestman late in the first half that, okay, we're kind of moving the ball, but it's too methodical. It's too slow. We're only getting 3, 4, 5, 6 yards at a time through the air. Let's take advantage of that speed.
And, as Billick would say, tempo, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, it wasn't even so much that they weren't running plays fast. It's just they weren't getting a whole lot of yardage when they were doing it.
Let me throw a scenario at you, right? And this is different because I was on that airplane. 2 years ago, right around the time that the Orioles were in the ALCS, right, I flew down to Tampa, and we played a game in Tampa, and that was a year we were pretty good. Obviously, the Orioles were very good. They were in the playoffs. And I remember going into that stadium that day, and, dude, there were 14,000 Ravens fans and 6,000 Tampa fans, and Flacco, first drive, boom, down the field. Second, boom, down the field. And the place just scattered, and it became a laugher, This game has that potential in talking about it the way you're talking about it, which is, you know what? 1st and 10, let's throw a bomb. 2nd and 10, let's throw and if we click on one, great. If not, we punt, give them the ball, and we'll go play defense, and we'll do what we're going to do. But if we hit on one of them, and even if we don't hit on one of them, if we come close to hitting on one of them, it's going to change the whole dynamic of the middle and the back end of their field because Mike Wallace running past you, Perryman running past you on the other side, and you got to match Smith up underneath or Aiken up underneath or Pitt up underneath with some linebacker or some, nickel or dime safety, that on a hot day, 7-0 with 13:21 left on the clock, and Jacksonville getting the ball, that takes the air right on out of the stadium. Boy, I like your offensive game plan, Luke Jones. I like it.
Well, I mean, that's been their biggest strength so far is to their passing game and to be aggressive with the passing game, and I like the idea of doing that. Look, it's not easy to do what the Ravens did against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2 years ago. So to expect that kind of an output would be that would be in my mind, a little silly to expect that. But can you get an early one? Can you get an early score? Can you get ahead early in the football game to set up then to try to get your ground game going a little bit more than what they've been able to do? I mean, that'll be the challenge. And but I think there is something to be said for a team that's 0-2, a young team, team still trying to find their way, a coach who the seat is quite warm. I think you have to acknowledge that. Certainly.
Well, the whole situation's quite warm because everything they built was about being 2-0, right, and coming home and play, and instead, that turd last week. I mean, from talking to all the people in Jacksonville, this. An early touchdown would bring out the boo birds in the deep south on a warm afternoon, and that should be the. And the other part, I've had a couple of Jacksonville people say this, Luke, and this is fascinating, and this goes back to John Ogden, Ray Lewis, Saraguses and Burnett's and Ed Reed's ass kickers in the huddle, right? And Joe's that guy now, right? So everybody in Jacksonville said when the bleeding started last week, who walks in the huddle and says, who's the grown-up there? And says, this stops right now, we're not going to head hang, And, watching Brock give up the home run the other night and sort of seeing Palmer even sort of predetermine it because Palmer has an intuitiveness of, the great ones do that. Jacksonville didn't have anybody to come in there and sort of stop that thing from getting out of hand while a guy like Phillip Rivers was pouring it on. And that is really something to consider, that the early part of this football game, because of the environment, because of who they are, that's where you don't want to get into a 17-13 fourth quarter game and give them a chance to win the game by kicking the ball around, making mistakes, having special teams disasters, these trick plays, as you point out, all of the chicanery that can go on that you're in a football game at 3:40 down in Jacksonville on a 100-degree day.
Yeah, well, and let's also remember, Jacksonville beat the Ravens last year, and they gave them everything they could handle the year before that. I mean, this is
and beat us in a year when we were really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is a team that has some ability to make things difficult on you. And Flacco talked about this a little bit, and that's why I like the idea of coming out being aggressive early on, even if it doesn't, even if you don't succeed, even if you don't throw a touchdown on that first drive, but take a shot. Because he's talked about how Jacksonville's defense has kind of forced them to be really methodical, really grind things out, really have long drives, haven't had real explosive long plays against them. But I like the idea of trying to see if you can shake Mike Wallace free or Rashad Perriman free early on to change that tone a little bit. But I see this game being a tough one for the Ravens because of, one, it's on the road. It's the second road game in a row. I think even if statistics don't necessarily support this, it's tough when you're in the midst of back-to-back or 3 straight road games or anything like that. I mean, that's just it's not easy to do in the NFL. And you do have a Jacksonville team that I think is clearly better than how they performed in San Diego. Now, that doesn't mean they're a playoff team, doesn't mean they're a particularly good team, but that's a team that was licking its wounds, coming home after such an embarrassing performance, and now staring the end of their season and perhaps the end of their coach in the mirror at this point at 0-2. So, I think that's a team that's desperate, even if they're not the best team. That's a team you got to be careful for. So, for the Ravens, I like the idea of being aggressive early on and trying to start fast. If you're kind of just, feeling them out and you go 3 and out, or it's a 5 or 6 play drive, and then you have to punt. I don't love the idea of that because I think you got to try to start faster on the road than they did last week. As great as it was, as much as you talk about, you learn from it, you build from it. You can't have that kind of a start on the road on a regular basis and expect to win. So you got to start fast, and I think if you start fast, the running game will come a little bit more. But this is a Jacksonville team that I do think has the Ravens' attention based on what's happened the last couple times they played, regardless of Jacksonville not exactly being a juggernaut for a long, long time.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, my post-game grouper and beer will be a little tastier. The grouper will be a little warmer. The beer will be a little colder if we're 3-0 when I'm doing post-game on Sunday night out on Facebook Live and YouTube on our WNSTV channel. Luke and I are hanging out. Luke will be in Owings Mills all week as well as at Oriole Park. I'm headed down to Jacksonville. You can find in Baltimore Luke on Twitter as well as Luke at WNST.net. I'm Nasty at WNST.net. Reminder, on Wednesday night, we'll be at Greenmount Station in Hampstead, Carroll County, hanging out with Alex Lewis, new rookie left guard we've talked about. We'll see how the left side of the line continues to form, as well as Ryan Jensen will be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry, speaking German. Maybe they'll put schnitzel on the menu for the night. I don't know. We'll find out. Anything you miss here, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day. From anywhere in the world, download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox free of charge each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's free. It's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month. Get on over there. Get in shape. I'm getting a little gooey here into the fall, so I got to get in shape myself. Working on my getting older, man. I got another birthday coming up. I got to get in the gym. Last but not least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. Around the clock, anywhere, anytime. Trades, updates. It happens for you on the WNST Tech Service. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis is here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. The SSV on WNST. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.